A little too tight.
All right. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here live Monday through Friday, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, live on YouTube and subscribing platforms. My guest is Brock Pierce. Brock was a candidate for the presidency. He is an entrepreneur who got into the business of internet very early on, saw the future, was able to make millions of dollars and invest in companies that are now standard to our business. Brock, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on.
Now, Brock, you are talking about the business of big tech censorship, which I think is something that affected the election in a big way, putting aside the fact that Donald Trump probably won by a landslide, and hopefully we'll find that out within the next week or two as evidence is presented before the Supreme Court and the Sidney Powell case. But I guess that I'd like you to outline, if you will, your evidence and your thoughts on big tech censorship of opinion.
Yeah, and it's more than just big tech. It's also the media industry, as we've seen. I'm a huge advocate for free speech. I think it is essential for us to being informed Americans. And as we saw, there was widespread censorship of the news through tech and the media. And it's a major problem. And this isn't something that's just started happening. As someone on the forefront of innovation, I've been watching censorship on YouTube and other channels for some time now. And it's now at least found its way into the mainstream opinion. We're now at least aware of it. And through our awareness, we can begin to vote with our feet. We can stop using platforms like Facebook. We can switch to Parler or otherwise. But I think it's important that we're aware of these things so that we can make informed decisions for ourselves, because right now we can't rely on those big businesses that are supposed to be providing us with information. We're on our own to figure it out.
Now, Brock, could you please describe exactly how this works? How do the big tech companies, Google, Twitter, Facebook, how do they do this? How do they censor opinion that they don't agree with?
Well, there's two parts to it. One is their legal standing. And so they take the position that they are technology platforms and therefore they are not responsible for the messages or the things that are written on those platforms. And that absolves them of legal liability. Now, if you're a publisher, you are then assuming liability. And so the big tech companies have to choose what they are. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And so they're using, basically, they're mitigating their legal liability for those things happening. But once they start censoring information, I would make the argument that they're publishers. And so then how are they doing it? You'd like to think that they're using technology. You'd like to think that they're using algorithms to identify inaccurate information or hate speech or things of that nature. But sadly, it's not the case. They have a group of people behind closed doors taking a look at messages and deciding what they deem to be inaccurate news or what they deem to be hate speech. And based upon those decisions, they're deciding what we're able to see. And what we've seen in terms of cameras behind the scenes, talking to people, they're explaining they can kind of do whatever they want. And so we have, I think, sufficient evidence to know that they are not just acting in the best interest of the public, but they are intentionally deleting information and hiding information that is not in line with their bias.
So they can both hide stuff and they can also make sure that it doesn't get the kind of traction that it would otherwise get. And I mean, I've been told that this is what's happened to my station on YouTube, that I should have much more of a following at this point, but that I've been shadow, as I call it, shadow banned. Now, do we have proof that they are doing this and that they are doing it in a manner that fits their own opinions? I mean, is there evidence of it?
I mean, I think we've seen it certainly with Twitter and all of the Hunter Biden stuff. I don't want to opine on the accuracy of any of those things, but the idea that the New York Post felt it was newsworthy, a publication that's been around for a very long time, Twitter decided that it was fake news, not having had access to any of the information. So, I mean, I consider that to be sufficient evidence. Whatever our beliefs are, whatever the reality is, it was newsworthy and something that the American people should have at least been able to be informed of.
Oh yeah. I mean, that was the most blatant thing. I mean, NPR actually publicly came out and said, we are not covering this story, period. And if you take a look at Hunter Biden's Wikipedia page, it says false accusations were made and they don't even tell you what they were. And it's so obviously biased and whitewashed by any objective standard. Now, these same accusations are being made with regard, at least in terms of an algorithm, by Sidney Powell, who is going to be filing a case as soon as this week against the Dominion software system, where she says that basically it had a backdoor to the internet and that local officials, local people in places like Maricopa County and Georgia and Pennsylvania were able to manipulate the vote by dropping votes into various folders for Biden and using stop-loss technology, which is what they use on Wall Street, that shut down the voting once Trump had reached a certain number in ratio to Biden's. Is there anything to that? Is that possible? And can people who handle code and IT and computer software, can they do that? And could they do that in this case?
I mean, it's definitely conceivable. I'm a big advocate for blockchain technology. Mm-hmm. Blockchain technology is the technology behind cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and otherwise. And what that technology does is it makes it so that you can't copy and paste. You can't duplicate a Bitcoin, for example, which makes that technology very well suited for elections. The idea that you can't copy it, and technology conceivably should be transparent. If there is a problem in the system, you should be able to quickly identify what occurred, where it occurred, so that you can get to the bottom of it. And so I'm an advocate for systems that are transparent and systems that are foolproof in terms of your ability to duplicate votes and provide immutable records where what has occurred can't be altered. And so the good news is that technologies are emerging that will ensure this type of thing can't happen again.
Well, they may not emerge fast enough for this election. And I think that while I know from nothing about Bitcoin, I'll acknowledge that, my understanding is that the amount of currency in circulation was set by a computer early on. It doesn't change, or it changes automatically every so often. It can't be manipulated by people who can add currency like they do at the Fed, for example. And that's the way Bitcoin retains its value as an objective means of exchange. Now, that same technology, I suppose, could that not be available for things like domain software? Or if it wasn't, I mean, by what standard do we have to know that the votes were accurately counted?
Yeah, so this technology can be used for that, and it is being used for that. So Utah County in the state of Utah has implemented a blockchain-based voting system using a service provider named Votes, VOATZ, and it was used in this general election. The first vote cast using a blockchain, or the first ballot cast, was cast, and it was a vote for my presidential bid, and that occurred shortly before the elections opened. So for a brief moment in time, I had more votes than every other candidate in the state of Utah combined. And so we are seeing it, and I think coming out of this election, because the integrity of our democratic process has been called into question, I think that we're going to see a lot of advancements in this area. My view is if you can bank from your phone at this point, you should be able to vote from your phone. There's no question in my mind that we can build technology that is transparent enough and foolproof enough that we can ensure the integrity of that election. And if anything problematic were to occur, we will be able to identify it, isolate it, and fix it.
Reminds me of Dixville Notch in New Hampshire. It's always the first place to vote, and you get like 10 people up there who they make a big deal out of that, right? Now, I mean, it seems to me that we ought to go back to hand voting. I mean, and get technology out of the business of counting votes, given the fact that Dominion technology was started to elect Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, according to Sidney Powell, who is presenting affidavits in that regard. and that it was put in place to keep him in power, and then was used by various countries around the world, and that the vote itself was counted in Germany and in Spain, not even in the United States. So, I mean, this system really stinks by any objective standard. I mean, yeah, and that, I mean, it's been criticized by liberals like Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar, who brought this up about a year ago. And yet, this is the system that we're depending on to count our votes. We have no idea who these local officials are, who are coders. You know, and evidence suggests that this company is filled with people who are biased. I mean, the creator of the software for Dominion Technology has been his Twitter account and his Facebook page shows really radical left-wing views, you know, pro Antifa, that kind of stuff, saying he's going to F Trump, you know, don't worry about it, we got it in the bag. And these are the people that are running this technology that's used in 21 states. I mean, it's so obviously, you know, rotten by any standard. I don't mean to rant.
Yeah,
here.
but it's not just absentee ballots. I think we've seen at least videos, and I can't speak to the authenticity of them, but we've seen videos of people, you know, filling out paper ballots at the. We're seeing it everywhere, and it's really sad because it's undermining our democratic process, which is a lot of the foundation of this country we live in. The idea that we have the power, the right to choose our government, to choose those people that govern over us. And whatever happens here, I pray that we find ways to upgrade this system, because if that continues to be called into question, if we continue to doubt the democratic process that we have, it does not bode well for our collective future.
No, it doesn't. And if they pull off this coup d'etat, then there's not going to be much of an investigation into this, because it might expose the coup d'etat itself. But yet something like 80% of Republicans believe that the election was stolen. About 30% of Democrats believe the election was stolen. And I think everyone knows in their heart of hearts that it was stolen. And it's a very troubling phenomenon, because this was the last bastion of freedom in this country, the ability to have one man, one woman, one vote. And if this is undermined, then we can forget about it. I mean, it's just, I mean, I find this to be so huge a scandal that, you know, and it's not over. I mean, we have to keep an eye on it. Now, Brock Pierce, you have been at the very beginning of the internet. You're like a seer. You could see the future in terms of various companies and how important they would be. You invested in those companies. You made money from those companies. What do you think is the future for these alternative social networks that are beginning to emerge, like Parler, Gab, a couple of others that I could think of? You know, I mean, I'm still on YouTube and you know, and all of the conventional ones, but I'm also starting up with Parler and Gab and all the rest. So, is there a future to those? Do you think they're going to present a legitimate competition to the mainstream guys?
I think the answer is yes. And especially as we become aware of issues around censorship and otherwise. But it's not just that, too. There's also the monetary aspect. The most precious commodity in the world historically was gold. And after gold, it became oil. Mm-hmm. The most precious commodity in the world right now is your data. And that's what these businesses essentially thrive on. This is what they're making money off of. And I'm a big advocate for us owning our data. And this is why it's so important that we have visionary leadership in our elected officials, people that understand technology, that have their finger on the pulse. When we watch our tech leaders testify before our elected officials, it's frightening to see how little they know at a time where technology has clearly changed all of our lives. It's impacted all of our businesses, and it's impacting all of our institutions. And it will continue to do so at an accelerated rate. We can't be managing technology through the rearview mirror. We have to have people with foresight. We have to have people with the vision that know how to navigate the road ahead.
Now, you say that data is the most important currency in the world today. It's as was gold going back to Roman times, really, and precious metals. How can we control our data? Isn't that proprietary? Don't we have some private ownership of this information? After all, this is information about us personally. Isn't that property? Isn't that like a real estate almost, or at least an abstract form of property, like money is?
It should be, and this is an area where our government has failed us just due to a general lack of understanding. This is our digital DNA. This is our most precious information. Most Americans don't know when that data is being collected. They don't realize what consents they've made, and they don't have any means by which to revoke those privileges and to take their data back. And this is an area where our government should be stepping in. This is our most precious property. This is our most precious information, and it's being bought and sold in ways that we don't even begin to comprehend. And that information is being collected, in our bedrooms. Our devices are listening to us, and that information is being used to monetize us.
Brock, you were a candidate for president, and you're also an expert in these fields. So I'm asking you, as both a political figure and as a tech guy, what can be done? How can we assume or reassume control over our data?
Well, I think the first thing is we have to have a means by which to revoke those privileges. We've given our data to people. They'll argue under consent. No one's read those terms and conditions or those end user license agreements. And we have to have a means by which to take our data back. And
what would those means be? I mean, you're a tech guy. Can that be done technically? Can we find a way to reassert? I mean, you say that, for starters, we have to cancel the status that these big tech companies enjoy in terms of not being sued. I think that's a step in the right direction because they are editorial entities if they're going to start to censor opinion. But beyond that, is there anything else we can do or we should be advocating?
I mean, as individuals, we have very limited options because we've kind of given that information out. This is an area where the government has to get involved and give us the means, the rights through legal protections to be able to revoke those privileges. We've given up our information and we have to have the right to, take it back.
Yeah. And it's also something that's much more pervasive than just the internet and just high tech. You've got Obamacare gathering up health information on every citizen from the minute they're born. I mean, they know what you're doing with the dentist. They have all of that in a gigantic database that's in Culpeper, Virginia, and that could be used someday to give you a Corey score, which is to say, is your life worth investing in? By centralized medicine. This is what they do in more socialized countries, and if your Corey score isn't high enough, you're not going to get treated. So, it's a big issue in terms of who controls this information. And when we start to get genome therapy online, which is a means to determine your health and your longevity, you could have the government deciding who you marry, whether you can have children because you may not have the right genomic map. So all of these things, while on the surface and conventionally are valuable information, I would think that they should be proprietary. They should be owned by you in the same way that you own your hubcaps and you own your car. This is property, and there needs to be a means to redefine patent and property rights so that these things can be proprietary and be owned by you.
Brock, I'm in agreement. Yeah. And with our medical records, no differently. You should own and control your medical records. You should be able to provide those records to your medical professionals for whatever time period you deem, and you should have the right to revoke those privileges or take your data back. The data should belong to you at the end of the day, and you should be able to control who sees it and for as long as you wish.
What do you think is going to happen with the election?
Well, today's obviously a big day. Trump approved the Biden transition team. And so now that the Biden transition team is being permitted to operate, I think it's a sign that we're probably going to see Joe Biden as the next president of the United States. I don't think Donald Trump is going to stop contesting the election, but the odds of that succeeding appear to be dwindling by the day. If for whatever reason he is successful, we could find ourselves with no one receiving a majority of the Electoral College vote. If that were to happen, Nancy Pelosi could be the next president of the United States, acting president, until the House of Representatives under the 12th Amendment chooses the president from the top three candidates based upon their Electoral College vote.
God forbid. No, I think that what my understanding is that what will happen is that if there's not enough electoral votes on, I think it's December 8th, then the election is thrown to the House of Representatives. And that's not Nancy Pelosi's house. That is, each state gets to select one elector. and that it is selected by the state legislatures. And in this country, there's 31 Republican state legislators, which means that Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States. So
that is correct. So this is the 12th Amendment. We've only the president has only been chosen by the House twice. In the year 1800, Thomas Jefferson versus Aaron Burr, and the House voted 36 times before choosing the president. And then again in 1824, it happened. But what does happen if the House has not chosen a president, I believe it's by January 6th, then the Speaker of the House becomes the acting president temporarily until the House is able to make a decision. My guess is if it does go down that route, the House may not be in a position to choose that president until sometime later. It might be post whatever time Nancy Pelosi or the Speaker of the House would assume the role of acting president until the House is chosen.
Oh, yeah, and I think as I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation here, the other two potential bombshells, and I'm going to be talking about this later today with David Horowitz, is the Sidney Powell Kraken. Let's see if she can put the cards on the table. She's talked about it. We will see, and and whether the Supreme Court is going to hear Pennsylvania. Anyway, Brock, let my listeners and viewers know where they could get more information about you and about your businesses.
Yeah, you can find me on most of the major social media platforms at Brock Pierce on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Or you can visit my campaign website, which is www.brock.vote, where you can see a number of my positions, what that platform looks like. And I'm going to continue to play a role. My running for president in this instance, I announced my candidacy on July 4th as an independent candidate. An auspicious day for an independent candidate, of course. And this was really an exploratory mission to understand what it takes to run for president as an independent candidate or as a third party. Just as a piece of trivia, the last third party candidate to be elected president of the United States was Abraham Lincoln, when the Republicans were a third party. And how did he do it? He built a government of his rivals. He went to the other third parties that he didn't necessarily agree with, much like the Union was originally founded with the 13 colonies, and turned them into his cabinet position. So this was my exploratory mission. I'd say I've completed basic training. I entered the ultimate arena, came out largely unscathed. I would argue better for it. And I didn't make enemies on either side. I ran on a position of love and unity because I think that's what this country needs right now. We need to find a unified path forward. I am so concerned. The United States feel like the divided states of America right now. We're divided politically. We're divided economically. We're divided in so many ways. And we do have to find a path back to unity. We're in this together.
Sounds like you're in for 2024.
I'm definitely exploring it, and it is my intention to run.
Excellent. All right. Listen, I really appreciate you joining me. Let's stay in touch.
Sounds good.